Hello everyone and welcome to another scrapbook layout process video. Today I'm doing something a little bit different with my actual layout. You can see in front of me here I've got my papers already selected and I have already done some trimming on these. These are the current mix-ins. I absolutely love mix-ins each and every time we have a new catalogue. I feel like they lend themselves really well to stand on their own for a layout, or you can mix them in with the other collections from any catalogue really because of the tone-on-tone nature. So you can see these are all very neutral type tones, and then there's a red in here as well, which works really well with all of these colours. And the other side of these are gorgeous as well. So both sides, it's hard to decide sometimes which side to actually use on a project. I love this Starry Night sort of feel with the black. The fleck through this one is fabulous. Grid lines always has me every single time. Wood pattern is fabulous. And then there's a gorgeous red gingham. But what I'm doing for today's layout is something I actually haven't done before. I am taking, this is the current September-October catalogue, and I looked at this layout and I absolutely fell in love with it. So I am recreating this after a fashion. I'm not doing it exactly the same as this. I'm changing the background up a little bit. So I'm not going to bring in papers from the other collections. You can see here, this is a Christmas story pattern that's within this collection here. And this gingham paper here is from The Good Life. I'm going to do different treatments to the squares, but I'm pretty much keeping the layout as is. So I'm just going to put this up here for reference. I've already cut 2-inch strips off each of my pattern papers here, and then I've cut them down into 2-inch squares because I worked out from the actual layout in the catalogue that that was what I needed to do. These are the zip strips from that paper packet, so I think I'm going to put some of those in here. And I'm doing this too because I have an in-person workshop coming up, and the people that register get to choose between a scrapbooking kit or a card making kit, and that is included with their registration fee. So this is going to be their scrapbook kit. I'm not sure yet whether this is going to be a 1 or a 2-page layout. It might just be a 1-page layout because I'm going to bring in some other elements to showcase some new products as well. You can see I've got things laid out here a little bit roughly as to how I want them to appear, and I'm thinking I'm just going to use white as the background. In the actual sample in the catalogue, they have used one of the mix-in papers here. There's a mink colour here, but I thought on white, because I'm just using mix-ins and I didn't have enough paper to cut enough kits, of course, I would change it up to white for the background, and then I'm going to do a black border around all of this. So I'm going to trim this piece of white daisy down to 11¾ by 11¾ inches, and then I'm going to gut out the middle of this black as well because I'm going to use the inside pieces of this for my photo mats. The other thing I'm going to be doing with this layout is some stamping as well. There isn't any stamping involved with this, but I do want to bring in some added texture behind these squares. So I'm going to be using a brand new stamp set for that. Now, in the sample, it had white stitching on some of the squares, but I thought what I would do is a very quick and effective way of distressing the edges just by bringing in some black ink, and I'm going to go around all the edges of these squares, and you can see that gives a little bit of definition between the pattern paper and the white cardstock. And yes, I am doing it for this black paper as well, just in case there's any of these light shades that are on the edge here, but it does give some separation, and I think this shows one of my favorite ways of distressing the cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep doing this distressing of all the patterns. You can see that that is working quite well, especially with this black mat in the background here. So you can see I've got all my squares prepped with black distressing. Now, one word of caution with this, I was inking them up and then putting them down on top of my prepared piece for my background. And you can see I've got a couple of little smudge marks here. I don't know if that's picking up on camera at all, here and here. I'm not too worried about it because, as I said, I'm bringing in some stamping. But if you want to keep this nice and clear of any smudges, I would put your freshly inked up squares somewhere else rather than straight on top of the white daisy. Now, what I'm going to do is a little bit of a test with some stamping before I commit to stamping directly onto the layout. So I've got some scraps of white here. I'll just bring my Versamat in. I've got this flipped over so that I've got the spongy side. And in this new seasonal catalogue, there is a great textured stamp. There's usually one in every seasonal catalogue, and I never think I need a new one, but there's always something a little bit different in each one. It's called Design Elements. There's this great wood element. You can do a lot of stamping with that. Stars. I love these little circles. I know they're just little circles, but you can do a lot of things with those. You can make your own crosshatch pattern, a little bit similar to what is on this piece of mix in here. So that's quite cool that it sort of matches. If you've watched my good friend Jama Malmi's recent video where she colour swatched all of the new colours, she used this stamp here. It makes for a great colour swatch if you love doing that sort of thing, but it's also going to be great to use on layouts. And then there are a couple of borders and a great swoosh type piece here. But the two I'm going to try out are this textured crackle type piece or the dots. I'm not quite sure which one I'm going to use, and I'm not quite sure which colour I'm going to use. So I've just got out my scraps. I'm going to stamp these onto the white and see which colour I like the best. So I'm going to start with Mink. It's the lightest colour. I haven't used these stamps before, so I'm just seasoning it to take off the sort of film that's on there after the manufacturing. So I'm going to put this one in Mink on this side. And you can see that is a great look right there. And on the other side, I'm going to put this crackle type medium. This is going to give such good texture to cards and layouts and so many different things. I absolutely love it. So you can see how cool that looks. Now what I'm going to do on this side, I'm just going to clean my stamp off before I do toffee. I could probably go straight to toffee because Mink is quite a light colour and it's not really going to contaminate the toffee. I do want to make sure that this stamp is nice and dry before I stamp again. So I've just got some scratch paper here left over from the other day when I made a Father's Day card. So you can see there's quite a bit of water in here because my chamois was fairly wet. So I want to get rid of most of that. So you can do that just by stamping off onto some scratch paper. So this side's got the crackle on it. Just set Mink aside for now. And I'm going to ink this up in toffee because there's toffee within this pattern here. And the reason why I'm matching up the sides is because I want to see how this looks. I'm actually going to bring in another piece of white scratch paper because what I want to try is second generation toffee. So let me just clear this off just a little bit so I can stamp off first. That might be just a little bit too strong with first generation toffee. So let's see how that looks. I quite like the depth of second generation toffee, and I can use these pieces on cards or on tags as well, so they don't necessarily have to go to waste. So now what I'm going to do is the same thing with the dots here, and I'm going to do first generation toffee and stamp that on. Now I could go straight to second generation, but because I pressed quite heavily, there's not too much ink left on that. So I'm just going to ink this up again and just go lightly and then stamp again. So let's have a look at how this worked out. I'm just going to close these up so I don't make a mess because that's been known to happen. And then I'm going to bring in my page and do a little bit of comparison. Now I'm going to move my Versamat out of the way so that I can see the black edge of this paper. It gets a little bit lost on the Versamat. So this is the Mink. Tuck that under there and you can see that helps ground the squares. In the sample I showed you, that had some textured pattern paper on it. So that helped bring in a bit of texture to the background, but I want to create my own. So that's the second generation toffee. And this is the first generation toffee. So I quite like how this looks. So now my decision is to do with colour and also with what texture I want to put on the background. If I want the dots, or if I want this crackle type look. So I'm going to turn this one over here that's going to have the mink. And the mink looks rather green up against this green paper here, the pattern paper. I think what I'm landing towards is the second generation toffee, not the first generation. So I'm just going to discard that. And I'm going to put this mink piece up against these two elements here because this gives off a little bit of a different tone. I don't know if you can pick that up on camera. When I put this next to this pine piece here, it picks up the greens. But when I put it next to the black and grey element here, it picks up the greys. So I think I'm going to do the mink because it's a more generic colour. So that's just some tips before you do your stamping and everything and you commit to something. You can always stamp onto smaller pieces and tuck them under and see what they look like. So now what I need to do is do my stamping before I adhere everything down. So I'm going to move all of these squares off onto another piece of paper. I have taken a photo of this so I can remember the order that I put all these down on. I didn't do too much fiddling around with this. I just wanted to make sure that there were no two greens up against each other, no two red patterns up against each other, so that everything sort of balanced its way across. And if I wanted to, I could flip papers over, but I decided not to use the grid paper because there's three elements here with quite strong lineal designs and there's another one with that, and they were my favorites for a background piece. I know that the grid paper I will be using for other elements as well. So I'm going to get my Mink ink out and stamp this up, and it was first generation so I don't need to stamp anything off, and I'm just going to go around in a random manner. I know that I've got more space at the top right, top left, in the middle area here. I'm going to rotate my stamp so that it is not exactly the same each time, and some of it is going to come off the edge and it's not really going to show on the black cardstock at all. So it's a little bit like random stamping, and then I'm going to do just a couple of random ones in the middle and lay my squares over the top so that will connect everything in, bearing in mind that I'm going to have photo holders on here anyway. And this one can come off here. And this one is sort of floating a little bit. I sort of stamped it so that it was within the white. So I'm just going to add a little bit of this. Just going to put it up the corner here into this area here so it looks like the design comes off the edge. And it's quite forgiving, this stamp set. You can puzzle it in and mix and match it around. You can make some of them a little bit larger than the others. So what I can do is actually join this one up to make it one big piece. I'm off the edge of my Versamat a little bit, so I'm just dragging that in so I get a good impression. And then I'm going to make this one down in this corner here a little bit larger as well. I think I'll go around this way so you can see I'm just turning it around so this section goes in towards here, even though some of it will be covered up with a piece of paper. So that's all I'm going to do for this. I'm going to adhere my piece of paper to my Versamat. I can use my rub and remove eraser to get rid of these little dot rollers. This is our brand new dot roller and it is refillable, which is wonderful. So now this isn't going to move too much, and you can see I've got a smudge here. So what I'm going to do is get my stamp set back out again, and I'm going to embrace that and put a little bit more of this texture stamp here. So that will just help disguise it a little bit. I don't want to put this all over the layout because I do want some white space in between my squares. So now I've got this piece off to the side here, and because it's all laid out ready to go, what I can do is start off with these two center pieces. So I'm going to bring in my T-square ruler. These are fabulous because it's a magnet piece, so you can use it just as a normal ruler or as a mini ruler, or you can use it as a magnet piece. You can have it so that it goes off the edge of the paper so that the numbers are around the right way, and that's what I'm going to do for this one, rather than over the edge. When you flip it over, it will hook over the edge of your Versamat, but the numbers will be upside down, and that doesn't bother me too much because I can see the numbers on my grid and I know that there is a 1/2 inch difference all the way around. But for this, I want to get my 6 inches by 6 inches and take my first piece And then I'm going to adhere that down, and that is going to be right in the middle from the 6 inches to the right. So 5 and 7 splits the difference here with the 6 in the middle. So that can go down straight onto the page, and then I can start building it across because all of these items are going to butt up against each other. So once you get the first one started, as long as you keep it butting up against each other, you can keep them fairly straight. But as long as you've cut these at 2 by 2, you'll find that they all fit in quite well. So that's my first layer done. So this one goes right in the middle. The next one, I need to go right in the middle of this square because this is going to be, as you can see here, a series of 5 squares. And I'm going to do 1/4 of an inch up from this one. So I'm just going to dry fit this one. There's 1/4 of an inch gap here. And when I dry fit the one at the top, there'll be 1/4 of an inch gap between these two. As long as the gaps are equal between each of these square elements, it will work out just fine. There will be a bigger difference between the top and bottom, but I just want the equal distance of 1/4 of an inch between each of those. So I'm just going to put that one back where it belongs and start adhering these sections here. And I've grabbed the wrong piece. So this one's got to go in the middle here. So I'm just going to put that off to the side and grab the one that I should be grabbing. I can take my T-ruler away, and this is what I love about this T-ruler. If you have watched me for a while, you know that I've used a T-ruler like this for a long time. It is great, but it does kick up on the end after a while, and when you put it over the edge of your Versamat, it doesn't reach right to the bottom. So that's what's so good about this Close to My Heart one. It'll go all the way across. It holds everything nice and firm, and you can hook it over the edge of your paper, and by securing your paper, your base layer, to the Versamat, everything stays nice and still for you rather than it moving around underneath your T-ruler. So I'm just going to keep building this. I think you've got the idea of where this is going. I'll do this row and then show you how to line up the next piece. So what I need to do now is put this one over top so that it's going to line up here, and I can grab the second one here from the edge. It's the second one in, and I can line that up so that it lines up to the edge of this and is 1/4 of an inch gap between this row and that row. And then I can do exactly the same thing for the next line down. I'm just going to skip ahead and grab this one so you can see how it all works. So this is my next row of 5 underneath here. Make sure this is all lined up nicely there. So that will be that next row of 5, and then for the bottom row, I can line this one up here and come 1/4 of an inch down, and these are all nicely spaced in between each other here, and all I have to do now is build the rest of these layers up. So what I love about the inked edges is it separates the patterns from each other, and that works really well because this is going to be like a title page. I'm going to bring in a 6 by 4, and then I'm going to start dressing this up just a little bit. I'm not putting too much onto this, but I think I would like some tags coming out from the top of this just so that I can put a little label on here with the year and anything else that I want to put. And I've cut some of the zip strips down. So these are 4 of the zip strips, and these are 3-inch lengths. So what I'm thinking of doing is cutting this one in half lengthways so that I can tuck it down and it becomes like a little tag tie here rather than using ribbon. So I'm just going to lay that there for now while I think about it. And I want to bring in some red over to this side as well. So I'm going to use this zip strip here and just tuck that in under there, and then these can act like washi tape. Actually, I'll put this behind here so you've got the idea of this being the little tag tie. And there are acrylic titles in white. They're also in wood grain, and they're in black as well. And if you look at the catalogue, they're not just in those colours, they're also in all of these other colours. But you can see the titles here, and you can mix and match these. You can have Happy Life, Happy Memories, The Best Life, The Best Days, Sweet Life, Enjoy Life, The Best Memories. So I think I'll be buying a few more packets of these because of the flexibility of being able to mix the words up together, which is what the ladies are going to do at the workshop. So I'm thinking I could use the wood ones here. They would work well. And the black ones are with the solid core. So there's no white on the edge here. So they work really well with this. But I'm going to bring in the white ones. And this is an acrylic shape. I've picked out the title I'm going to use, and you can see they're quite thin. They don't add a lot of bulk. I'll bring in a larger one. So that is quite a thin piece. And I'm thinking I might do Everyday Life. And this is going to be an album with moments that don't necessarily make it into family events. So this could be a photo a day type project. It could be a week in the life project. So it's just going to be photos that I think I need to tell a story about. Now I'm looking at this and I'm thinking maybe I need to turn this around. I was going to have the layout this way, but you can see I've got white on semi-white here. It stands out all right, but I do want to try it with the heavier colours at the bottom. And I think that pops a whole lot better than what it looked like before. I'm actually going to scooch this down a little bit more so that my words are together. Now what I could also do is get some cardstock and adhere it to my letter and then trim that out. But I like having the pattern showing through. And then to bring in some embellishments, I think I'll bring in some die cut shapes, and these work exactly the same way as the acrylic titles. So you can see, I'll turn this over because it's easier to see on the wood grain pieces. The acrylic shapes are obviously loose pieces, but there's quite a variety here that I can mix and match. So I'm thinking, because I've got the white acrylic, I've got a black matte. So this is just playing around with things until you get the look that you want. So because I've got black, I've got white acrylic, I think the wood grain little hearts are going to work really, really well. And because this is an everyday life type album, I'm going to push out this camera, put that in as well. Oh, and there's a little heart right inside there too. So I'm just going to push that out. I think I might sit my little camera on top of the Y. That sits quite beautifully. Or what I could do is swap these around. So there is quite a little bit of fussing going on with this, but once I have everything sorted, I know that I'll be good to go and I'll be able to adhere everything rather than just sticking things down and thinking later on, oh, I really wish I'd used that camera. So let me have a look at how this looks. Tag needs to come up a little bit. I don't want to make it too busy. And I think I really love the camera on that little section there. So I'm going to go away. I'm going to adhere all of this. Here's my finished layout. I'm going to bring in the original one here from Close to My Heart. I think this would look lovely with any combination of these patterns. If you wanted to bring in a stronger red, you could definitely turn over this pattern paper here and have that. If you wanted the stripe, you can mix it all up and have it look totally different from what the original does. As I said before, I haven't brought in any of the actual paper collections. I think mix-ins can stand on their own if you wanted to, or you can, as the name suggests, mix them in with the other collections. So here's a bit of a closer look at that title. You can see it really doesn't add that much bulk at all to your layouts with the thin acrylic height. Would it be bad if I said that my favourite element on this page is actually the little camera? I could have a whole sheet of die cut cameras. I love them so much. I think the stamping with the design elements has worked really well on the background. It creates just the right crackle sort of effect on this. I did change my zip strip placement just a little bit because I just felt the red here was just standing out on its own a bit too much, and I wanted everything to flow across this way on the layout with the heart, the tags, the little zip strips here. I put the black one down on the edge here because it brought some more black to this right side of the layout, and then it leads in obviously to the photo being the main feature of the page and into the title. As always, I will have links to everything below, and there's some very exciting news happening next week, so don't miss out on the YouTube collab that the Creative Design design team are putting together for next week. And as I said, we have some exciting news to share, so don't miss out on that. Thank you so much for tuning in. I would really love it if you haven't done so already to please subscribe and like this video. By subscribing and liking the videos, it really does help my small channel out. Thank you so much for watching. As always, happy crafting and bye for now.